Love to hear from you. Let us know who you are, where you're calling from, so to speak. In the meantime, I want to introduce our speakers. So wait for it. Wrong button. I'm over here trying to be fancy. So yeah, Chantel, why don't you kick us off?
Hello, I'm Chantel Branch, Senior Account Manager here at iPullRank, and I'm really happy to be here.
Jared.
Hey guys, I'm Senior Account Executive Jared Thomas, iPullRank. Happy to be here. Thank you all for joining. Let's get it going. Excited.
And Mike King. That's all I'm gonna say. Cool. So yeah, while we give folks a few more minutes to get us or to join us or what have you, I just want to talk a little bit about what our agenda is for today. So we're going to talk about some of the things that 2020 has brought us for SEO. We're going to talk about some of the trends that are going to continue, not necessarily just SEO trends, but also just like consumer behavioral trends as well. Some things that won't change, and then some new opportunities that have popped up for 2021. So I'm going to pause here and allow everyone that's in the room, if you've got any questions that you want us to answer throughout the course of this webinar or at the end as well, there's a section at the bottom where you can ask a question, or you could also just put it in the section to the right. And super excited to have everyone here. Looks like we've got some folks from Texas, we got some folks from Munich. Hey Izzy, how you doing? We've got some folks from Minnesota, Long Island. Very excited to have everybody joining us.
Yep, in Tampa, I see you. Congrats on the Stanley Cup. Yeah, I got it.
Nice.
Did you just say congrats on the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, they won it, didn't they? I don't know. Maybe I'm off.
Well, reference. I didn't even know, Jared.
Got to be, multifaceted.
Gotta know all the things. All right, cool. Let's get this going. So let's talk about what 2020 has brought for SEO. So, at the top of the year, Google made that change where feature snippets are no longer appearing in both sections. There's the May 2020 core update, and then we've just been living in the COVID-19 world. So, just in case you didn't know what happened with feature snippets, it used to be that you could be in the feature snippet and also be in the top 10 results. That is no longer the case. And so, there were folks that were really concerned because it created that halo effect where if you had the feature snippet and you were in the top 10, it was like, oh, that must be the result. And people ended up clicking on you. So why does that matter? Well, if you had both, like I said, you could end up getting more of those clicks. And what you really need to think about moving forward is like, should I be optimizing for feature snippets? Do those matter as much as I think they did before? There's certainly a lot of value in it from a branding perspective. There's a lot of value in it from the perspective of that being what is the answer in Google Assistant and things of that nature. So, it's still something that brands need to be thinking about. Like, do we want to go after this? And a lot of the bigger brands, we work with some financial services companies, and they really seem to care about those featured snippets. So it is something that we definitely optimize pretty heavily for those. And the process for getting them certainly hasn't changed. It's just that, you're just going to get a little less real estate. Then there was a May 2020 core update. We just saw that there's a lot less emphasis on authority and more emphasis on the quality of content. And I've been a big proponent of this for a number of years. I gave a presentation a couple of years ago called Technical Content Optimization. And one of the things that I showcased was this idea of how content may be weighted differently in the algorithm than links. And so what we do as SEOs, because we believe that links are the most important factor, we over-index on that. But you could certainly fulfill more of the expectations around content and rank better than someone who really just went after those links. So bottom line is that, we've heard it forever that we should be focusing on quality content. And we saw that the winners in this May core update were more of those smaller sites with lesser authority, but better content. So suffice to say, you got to double down on your quality content. And, just quoting what the chief SEO consultant at Searchmetrics said, he said, you don't have to be one of the strongest as long as you have a sound EAT foundation. So expertise, authority, and trustworthiness obviously are core tenets of marketing in general. But it's just very clear that Google is continuing to optimize towards showcasing the highest quality content.
That sounds like a way to live life too, though, Mike. Expertise, authority, and trustworthiness literally sounds like it should be my Tinder bio going forward.
I mean, if I was in that frame of life, I certainly would have that as well. So I've never been on dating apps, but anytime like I meet somebody or I'm hanging out with somebody and they're like, yeah, I'm not being able to get the matches that I want. I'm like, yo, give me your phone. And I do what I call dating profile optimization. And
there you go.
I kill it every time. Like every time someone is like, oh, wow, my matches went up. I went on all these dates. I'm like, you're welcome. I'm real life Hitch. Anyway.
Nice.
So Google also made this announcement around Core Web Vitals. So, just really indicating to us that there's going to be an update where speed is a much bigger part of the algorithm. So, whenever Google makes those types of proclamations and letting us know like well in advance that this is something that's going to matter, we end up seeing a lot of people orient themselves around doing that. So when Google said mobile first indexing was coming, everyone suddenly had a responsive website. And I'm hearing more conversations from people, especially people that are coming to us and being like, hey, we've got to fix our SEO. They are explicitly mentioning Core Web Vitals. So these are all things that you should have been doing anyway. Like, I think Google really just kind of rebranded all the things we're seeing in Lighthouse, things we've been seeing in Page Speed Insights for a number of years, and really highlighted this idea of like the shifting content and so on. But the bottom line is that there's never been a better time for you to get the buy-in across the organization to improve your speed. And I've always, been a strong believer that page speed is something that everyone cares about. Like it's something that you can point to directly. It's something that they physically experience. And it's one of the easiest things to get buy-in to fix. The problem is it's always like some other random team we've never even heard of that's been working on it. So enough about page speed. The real big elephant in the room for this year, of course, has been the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no one on this planet that has been unaffected by this, unless you are like, one of those, how there's people that like live in the woods and have never touched society. Like maybe they're not affected, but everyone else has been. So we've been seeing some big shift in the SERP landscape. It's not just that like search behavior is changing, but we're seeing more things being introduced into the SERP that weren't there before. And so I made this point earlier in the year that it's time to reconsider rank tracking, because the way that we look at it, like around this 10 blue links, is not reflective of the user's experience at all. So if you're looking at this SERP specifically, COVID-19, you've got like, I don't know, 8 different units before you would see any organic search results. And if you are a brand that is specifically looking to see how well they rank for COVID-19, terms, and you're like, oh, I rank number 1, that doesn't matter. You're so many pixels down that no one is ever going to go look at that stuff. And so to the bigger point, user behavior has changed dramatically as well. Jared, you got anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, I know something before coming into the SEO space. I didn't really think about, how real life affects what we do on the internet and how we search, right? I think the main thing that was really interesting about that one slide right there is that people are browsing on the internet 54% more than usual, right? So I know me personally, right? I'm looking at different things. Like back in the day, I would look at, whatever we're looking at, like sports, entertainment, things like that. Now I'm looking at trampolines for my child, right? Now I'm looking at childcare. Now I'm looking at all these different things, which presents a huge opportunity for certain segments, right? So one thing you should be looking at is how does these things impact your day-to-day life, right? Think about how you search and how can you, meet your customer with a good experience and a good product.
Yeah, I think the reality of it is, more and more people are spending more and more time online doing everything. And that means there's going to be more searches, more opportunities for us to get in front of them. And the other reality is that, the internet is on sale. Like everything you want to buy, everything that you want to bid on in media and things like that, it's all on sale. So there's a lot of opportunity for those that are being active in digital marketing. So as far as the 2020 trends that are going to continue, there has been a dramatic explosion in e-commerce. Everything is coming online. Everyone is working from home. There's going to be a lot of decreases in small and medium businesses just from the reality of them shutting down. And big corporations that have the cash reserves are going to continue to use this as an opportunity to really grow forward. So e-commerce, we did a webinar on e-commerce and how to prepare for Black Friday a couple of weeks ago. There's just been such a dramatic explosion in e-commerce activity. The reality of it is that people just don't want to go outside and go to stores. And realistically, we can expect that this is going to continue to trend upwards. We're seeing that, the retail landscape online has, or just the general U.S. retail landscape has grown dramatically year over year. But we're also seeing that online e-commerce sales has dramatically increased as well. So, people spent, trillions of dollars online this year, and that's up 44% year over year. So e-commerce is not going anywhere. And the future of work, like more people are not going to come back to work. Chantel, you got any thoughts on this one?
I have many thoughts about this, Mike. You know how I feel about working from home. It is literally the antithesis of everything that I encompass. My extroverted nature just does not work well with being in my 750 square foot living space and consistently just talking to screens. So I'm sure I'm not alone, but the fact is that we've got to figure out ways to make this work. When you look at this slide, it says 69% of people expect that work will permanently change. And I'm getting the sense that that means a lot of different things. It means where you work will change. It means what your role includes will change. It probably means what your salary is going to be is going to change. And unfortunately, I think that there's going to be some contraction in positions, and we may see more people's roles disappear. Because the one thing about working from home is it does show people how much work you're doing. You don't think it does, or you don't think it does, didn't think it did previously, but what you've learned in 6 months of this is exactly who's doing what, how much you're doing, what type of moves you're making, and where the redundancies are if you are a business owner. Mm-hmm. So that leads you to that next piece, which says about whether your skills are not up to date. From the employee side of things, some folks are starting to realize that maybe their job is not for them, because maybe their job is for them, but maybe what happens if they lose this job? Mm-hmm. Am I up to date? What happens if I get fired? What happens if I get downsized? What's next for me? And this is putting a lot of folks in a position where they are going to have to, again, utilize some searching to find a way to sharpen up those skills. Maybe, what is the website? A masterclass or two might be necessary for some folks, because the future of work is going to require you to show and prove versus charm your way into a position and just be friendly and cool enough to kind of hold on to your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to add on that. I think another important one is, right, I wish I had a better or more up-to-date skill set. And I think that applies back to the decrease in SMBs, right? Think about like a small pizza shop, right? You don't have any digital branding, right? You're not thinking that, right? But nobody prepared for what happened, right? Starting in terms of COVID and the pandemic, right? So how do you prepare for that? Adaptability is everything, right? How do you adapt in your environment? As far as your skill set, what are you doing? Especially like someone like myself in sales, right? You can't do the same things. You have to create other different touch points to, connect with your customer. And I think that's huge. More people need to be up in their skills, and how do brands, tailor that and really teach their employees to do better, right? That's really
agreed. And to that point, video conferencing is not going anywhere. Like Chantel was saying, we're going to, spend more time in front of screens. My daughter's going to school on Google Classroom. And of course, we're seeing just a lot of growth in the search volume around those ideas as well. Chantel, did you want to add anything on here?
I did, because the one thing about video conferencing being here to stay is that we're going to have to also develop a new way of operating. So eventually everyone's going to have to be on screen. There's going to be an expectation of how you present yourself. If you're a person who gets a haircut every day, you're going to have to make sure that you have that haircut every day. less the social structure of video conferencing is going to get clearer lines around it. We're still learning, so we allow for a lot of things right now. But I think if we're going to continue doing this, there's going to have to be a little, there will be more lines around it, because this is work and this is our office. So every office has a way that they operate. And I think that with video conferencing, you know, folks saying like, I don't feel like being on camera, will eventually not be allowed. But it's something that people are facing across all businesses. I had a conversation yesterday about a person who runs a company, and their number two was like, well, I don't want to be on Zoom camera. It's like, you're the vice president.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is I got to lean into being a classic man.
Yeah.
All right. So what are your thoughts on video streaming?
So the thing of it is this. I was a movie person. I love that movie theater by your house. You know the one. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I was really resistant at first, but I will tell you that right now, I looked at a Mint report. I buy a lot of video streaming. I literally got Disney Plus for two things: Hamilton and Black is King. And I have not deleted it yet, because I understand now that there's so much more. I have that. I also have now HBO Max. And I think because my ability to go out and about is being restricted, that I'm looking for opportunities to entertain myself when I don't want to be on video calls with my friends, because that kind of faded a little quickly because I'm on Zoom calls with my coworkers. So when I want to entertain myself, I'm like, well, I guess I'll watch Hamilton again and then regale my family with my singing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that is an experience that everyone's having right now. Like, we just need to find ways to be entertained. We need ways to learn things. We need ways to disconnect from the environment that we are literally sitting in all day. And so, yeah, there's video content in general is going to be huge moving forward. But the thing is that these markets are also going to get a lot less competitive because of the fact that so many businesses are going to disappear by the end of this year. You know, the payroll protection plan that our government rolled out wasn't enough for anybody. You know, and a lot of these businesses are just not going to be able to sustain. They're not going to be able to be more competitive online or off right now. So again, this is part of why everything is effectively on sale right now. Like, even if you're doing SEO, well, a lot of these smaller businesses that were competing can't continue to roll out content, can't continue to build links, or they can't continue to be as competitive on the paid side as well. And so again, these bigger brands are going to supplant them because they still got money to spend. And, you know, to that point, we're also seeing that, you know, the fact that they can push through this, like, a lot of these bigger brands have planned for this, because, you know, there was talk of a recession coming for the last few years. We didn't know it was going to be a result of a pandemic, but a lot of businesses had been planning for this. And so they've got the extra money to, you know, benefit from. And we talked about this when we did our COVID-19 webinar back in like April or May or whenever it was, how the brands that are able to spend through this end up being the brands that benefit after this. And so, you know, for our big clients, that's great, because they're going to double down with us. They're going to go into 2021 like, how do we go bigger? But for, you know, smaller clients or other businesses, it's going to be very difficult for them to hold on. So why are they really able to withstand all of this? Well, one, you know, if you think about big businesses like Amazon, they're already spending a lot of their budget on digital marketing. And of course, they're not going to like dramatically cut that. They're going to look for places where they need to pull back, but they're going to continue putting their gas on the pedal. I mean, putting their foot on the gas pedal, so they can continue to capitalize here. I mean, if you think about Amazon, Amazon is one of the businesses that has performed best as a result of this. Like, where are you going to go when you want to order your PPE? Where are you going to go when you want to order your your gas mask because you're like suddenly stockpiling things or ordering toilet paper and things like that. Like it's gonna be Amazon. And
Right.
so on the back of that, Amazon is also a marketplace. It's not just what they physically deliver to themselves. There's plenty of other businesses that are selling through Amazon. And of course, they understand that that demand is there. So of course, they're going to be more active on Amazon. So the other thing is that, I'm sorry, did you want to say something, Chantal? Okay. So,
sad.
so yeah, 41% of businesses are spending 500K or more on digital marketing every year. And
all the numbers come
yeah,
to us.
let me hold that. Let me hold that. And when it comes to them focusing on inbound marketing, well, where are they going to go? They are primarily focusing on organic search. And so, you know, of course, we're going to have a lot of these conversations about like, how do we maximize these efforts? How do we get them faster? How do we, you know, do more with less? Because a lot of these smaller businesses are starting to scale back, whereas the bigger businesses are like, all right, how do we do more? How do we go after keywords that we weren't thinking about before because there's less competition?
Yeah.
And then if you look at the businesses that have been largely affected by the foot traffic, we're seeing that, you know, everyone dropped off around March 25th, but a lot of these industries are starting to come back. So airports, I mean, sorry for you guys, your people ain't really trying to fly like that. But we're seeing on the top side of that, things like, you know, supermarkets, you know, rallying back. We're seeing like counter service restaurants starting to rally back and so on. And a lot of these businesses have changed their web presence to be more conducive to the new behaviors of people. Anything you want to add to that one, Chantal?
Well, as a person who, like I've said 4 times on this in 22 minutes, I like to go outside. And I would say that supermarkets, the trips to the supermarket probably have kept me sane. I've observed a difference in the way that some brands, like a Trader Joe's, utilizes the internet to get you as excited about coming in. They used to offer a little paper flyer, but they figured out ways to put that kind of stuff online. So if you start looking up to see like what are Trader Joe's adjusted hours, you see that, as well as what used to be the flyer is now being presented digitally. So that it gives you, if you've never shopped at Trader Joe's, because believe me, I meet people who've never been in a Trader Joe's. I feel for that.
Avoid as much as possible.
Yeah, but you also live in a very, very busy one. The one I go to is not too busy, but between going to the supermarkets, finding ways to get counter service, utilizing the apps for like a Chick-fil-A, you know, the way that they deal with their car side service. You're seeing ways for us to get out there and try to move around if we can. And they're inviting you to come back. I believe Bed Bath & Beyond might have said, like, we're open, please come to our store, just wear a mask. And when the mall opened, the same thing happened. If you were on their list, they emailed you and were like, please come back. So that's email marketing at its finest. Good subject line, open rate.
100%. Ethan recommends that you try the dried mango slices.
I have them, and I also have them in chili.
Nice. All right, so the enduring trends, you know, we're seeing that people are going to continue to use e-pharmacies, use e-doctor visits. Obviously, e-commerce is exploding. More people are doing video on demand, and we're seeing that, you know, a lot of the movie industry is shifting to support that. Unfortunately, Christopher Nolan didn't agree, and so I had to drive to Jersey to go see Tenet this past weekend. But, you know, we're seeing more of that. What'd you say?
Was it good or?
It was good, but there's definitely some confusing parts to it. And, you know, I consider myself a pretty intelligent person. And I was just like, I'm not really sure what I just watched. I'll tell you guys about this offline, but you can actually rent out Alamo for like $150. Anyway, so anything you wanted to add here, Chantal?
I would say that the best thing about these enduring trends is they've really optimized the doctor visits. So doctor visits, whether it's like a checkup or therapy or whatever, I think that those areas, they've really sharpened the they've sharpened their knives in that, and it's a much easier experience, especially because if you are concerned about going into a doctor's office and worrying about exposure, calling a doctor on a Monday and getting a doctor's appointment on a Tuesday, and then being able to have them digitally send over your prescription by Tuesday night, closed your circle, avoided your exposure, and still took care of you. So that's a positive that's coming out of this. You know, and more doctors are having to open themselves up. If you meet many doctors, they're like, oh, I don't deal with internet stuff, and they're having to step in. And then on the fitness side, we can look at those Peloton numbers and, you know, and then what's come after Peloton. It's not just Peloton, Nordic Track. And then like there is a guy, somebody on Amazon that created a knockoff Peloton that Amazon had to say that that is not our Peloton, don't do that. But people are actually doing it. All of us, all those years laughing about the treadmill being a coat hanger, because people don't want to go into the gym, they're actually on their treadmill, they're on their bike, they're competing with their family. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So there's a question in here as to how telehealth companies will make money. I mean, how does regular health make money? Largely by charging the health insurance companies, right?
Yeah.
I don't know enough about their models to really answer that, but I feel like it should be easy for them to do it that way. And Michael says, don't hate on Jersey, but he's calling from Philadelphia. So I don't understand, because as a Philadelphian, I've hated on Jersey my whole life. And now I live in New York. I continue to do so. So he and I are going to have to talk offline to understand that better. All right, let's talk about SEO things that won't change in 2021. So some key things, you know, creating useful content will continue to be the way to do things. Prioritizing UX, I think, is really important. And, you know, the reality is that technical SEO never stops. There's always something to do. There's always technical debt that's created across the organization. And being authentic to attract, you know, more of that authority is exactly what you need to do. So on creating useful content, what are your thoughts there, Jared?
Yeah, so I think we all know when we see this more now than ever, right? This stat is really interesting. About 78%. Oh, my side. Go back. Yep, 78% of consumers prefer to get to know a company via articles rather than ads, which brings us back to that one line, right? Everybody wants to be told and not sold, right? So, you know, I think in today's stance, right, especially with all the turmoil going on from political, from social injustice issues, right? People want to know where you stand as a brand on certain issues. So that has to be said. And plus, people want to know about your product before speaking to a sales rep, right? I don't want to speak to sales. They may not know my problem, but if you know my problem before I even get to sales, then that tells me a lot. You know what I mean? So that's something that you should be thinking about in terms of your content, right? How can you provide a better experience for your audience? Who is your audience before you even get there? A lot of companies don't even understand who their audience is before they create the content, right? So make sure you do those things and deliver on that. And then 70% of organizations believe custom content, right? So think about everything else, right? The creativity. How much effort are you going to put into it? You're going to put in a 1,000-page blog and expect your sales to increase? That's probably not realistic, right? So what other things can you do to separate yourself from competitors, right? Look at what your competitors are doing and saying online, how they're engaging with their consumers, right? And what can you do to add your own flavor and spice to it?
Absolutely. And I'm going to quote myself here. It's a great time to do a content audit and see what content you need to have adjusted. You know, there are so many things that have changed about how businesses are operating, so many things that have changed about consumer needs. And so if you still got content out there, people, you know, that doesn't align with what's going on right now, people may come across that and say like, okay, this brand isn't up to date. This brand isn't focused on, you know, delivering in the COVID-19 time. And so they may skip you because you haven't updated your existing content.
Right.
It's huge.
So as far as like content that we should create, I'm going to throw this one over to you, Jared, because you've been doing a lot of video content for us. So take it away.
Yeah, so I think in terms of brands, I think video is going to be the way to go, right? Because it goes back to our earlier point of how do you be authentic and how do you show your brand voice, right? It's very hard to do that within text, right? So if you have employees that are willing to, you know, go out there, you know, kind of wave the brand flag, right? You know, creating video is a great way to do that, right? So I know me personally, I create a lot of video on LinkedIn, and one thing for me was How do I use social in order to break down the sales barrier and build more relationships with people so I could eventually sell more, right? And the best way to do that is not by me saying, hey, I'm SEO, I'm this, but actually showing them that, hey, one, I know my stuff. Two, I could provide value. But three, I'm also just a regular person like you, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, being authentic and having that relationship. So showing that and giving it across and being a person on video is going to be huge moving forward, whether it be social, whether it be on your brand homepage, wherever the case may be. Show your voice, be a person, especially in today's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it aligns directly with people consuming more video content, if they're streaming at home, like when they're watching, at night, they're also like, all right, well, I've got more time to watch a webinar. And the 65 people that have joined us today are using this time, and we definitely appreciate them. And consuming content in a different way. Like, obviously I can write another 15,000 word blog post, but people are more leaning to video right now. So of course we're going to do the same thing. And so, okay.
I was going to say, to tie it back to the video consumption, right? The Disney Plus and the HBO, right? Look how people are consuming content. It's video. So you should be, creating content in that same format that they're currently engaging in.
Absolutely. And so, as far as like optimizing that content, again, I don't think much has changed there with respect to what those best practices are and how you capitalize on them. Just make sure you're using the right video posting platform. We love Wistia, but there's any number of solutions out there. Make sure you've got a video transcript. Make sure that your thumbnails are engaging so people are encouraged to click on them. Also mark up your content, with like video schema, or create a video sitemap, and make sure your title and your description are compelling as well. And then make sure the rest of the page is also relevant to whatever you're talking about, because end of the day, Google does have the technology to see video at this point, but they're not using it on every single video because of the fact that it's so computationally expensive. If you got a video on YouTube, they do use that technology wherein like you can be searching for something and it'll be like, hey, the section that you're looking for in the video is right here. You'll see that directly in the SERP. But they're not necessarily doing that on your self-hosted videos at this point. So we still prefer to have self-hosted videos so we can drive the traffic directly to us, but we'll also optimize for YouTube after the fact so that we can get value from both places.
Right.
Totally.
Other content types, interactives. What are your thoughts there, Jared?
Yeah, so interactive, I think there's a big misconception out there in terms of what exactly interactive content is, right? So for those who aren't familiar, right, interactive, it could be anything from quizzes, assessments, not surveys, no, so to speak, but like I said, assessments, quizzes, it could be infographics, you name it, right? But the beauty of interactive content is that it's a two-way relationship, right? So think about content that you put out the static, right? The main benefit of interactive content is that you actually get to track and use logic-based questions to provide a better experience for your user, and then provide more information and collect more data so your sales team or your marketing team could better market to that consumer, right? So think about, if you were to do a survey, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, this was the best gated content I've ever seen, or this was the best form fill. Nobody's ever said that, right? But think about it. That's what interactives are, right? If you can get a customer to fill out a 10-question survey to better understand where they are in the funnel before you, serve up content or before you even call them, how much more valuable is that, right? What about, think about the resources you put into static content like a regular article or blog. The main thing is you don't even know where the person is reading or what really interests them, right? That's the beauty of interactive content, that you can actually see where they are, where they're spending their time. And then, once again, it's a two-way street. It's much more engaging. People stay on the site. It's much more stickier. It's better UX, UI. There's so many benefits there. So if you aren't creating interactive content right now, think about some ways you could repurpose some of your static content. They may have stats and some statistics, all these other good things that you can incorporate into interactive and test it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're optimizing these things, just make sure, one, they're visually engaging. There's a lot of people that do interactives that I'm like, why is this an interactive? Mm-hmm. The imagery and messaging needs to be on brand, of course, focus really heavily on the user experience. And then look for opportunities to position it so that you can gain that link equity, because these interactives tend to work a lot better than static content for driving that authority. And then again, make sure the rest of the page is also relevant. So one of the things that we like to do is have text content on there, so it's not just a bunch of images and videos flying around. I think the City Wars thing that we did a number of years ago is a good example of that. It's a interactive that we built on the back of some local market data, and then basically gave the user those floating cities that you see in Star Wars, but those cities were like Philly and New York and Miami and things like that. And you could vote on the dark and light sides of those cities. And it became the type of thing where it's like you're collecting information about users, but you're also making it this gamified experience. So, Jared, what are your thoughts on webinars and podcasts, considering that you're on one right now?
Yeah, I think they're all good. I think the most important thing is how you actually promote that, right? Right? How do you get people to come to your webinars, or how do you do these things, and why are these things so important, right? The reason why they're so important is because one, you need to, better engage with your audience, right? You need to show that you have value to bring to the customers. You know who you are, to provide more insight. And then for podcasts, what we've done, right? We're actually up to episode 15. If you guys aren't familiar with Rankable, we actually have one tomorrow. Please come and join. But what we've been doing is actually establishing those relationships. We had the opportunity to have, brands like IBM, Advanced Auto Parts. We have Site Comply tomorrow, right? And the importance of this is just having all of these different touch points across the web to show you that you are a brand, that you are a person, and share your insights. So that's one thing we've done. We adjusted completely, since the pandemic. We have a full setup in the office, but since we, not in the office, right, we had to adapt on the fly, right? And the impact that it's had on our business, and the relationships that we've built from this has been, we can't even put into words. It's been crazy, for especially during the pandemic. So if you aren't doing these type of things now, how are you going to get it? What kind of webinar do you want to create, right? How do you get people to the webinar? How do you put it on social, not just saying, hey, come to my webinar? What are the value can you provide there? And in terms of podcasts, right, just be a person, right? Be yourself, be authentic, and have some good guests on and provide value to your audience. That's something we've been doing, and continue to do. So please think about it if you aren't already.
Yeah. And as far as how you should plan out your 2021 content, the first thing to think are, what are the gaps that we need to fill? We can't just be creating content for content's sake, as Faja says here. What can be repurposed? What can we further maximize? And again, that content audit will give you a lot of that information on what to do there. And we take a very data-driven approach. It's not just like qualitatively, what is it do we feel like making? It's like, what does our client base need? What do our customers need? What do our clients' customers need when we're doing this for them, so we can better understand, what is actually going to move the needle here? It's not just making infographics and doing like an expensive form of arts and crafts. It's about like driving business goals. And then the UX design is incredibly important. Showing an example of Medium here, I think, is a really, really good way to showcase that design is not just about like having a bunch of bells and whistles all over the place. It's also about structure. It's also about making things very clear to the user about where they need to be and how do they accomplish their goals. And so that's something I think SEO has historically struggled with, is having good user experiences. And so, we've got designers on our team like Melissa Fernandez and Melvin, who really drive us to make sure that we keep this type of stuff top of mind, and we're not just making things that people can't actually use.
Right.
And, ultimately with SEO, it's not a short-term thing. And I don't want to say it's not a short-term thing because of the fact that Google is going to take forever to catch up with whatever you're doing. We all know that, organic search has one of the higher ROIs. Like, the reality of it is SEO is underpaid. When you think about what people spend on paid search every day versus what they pay on organic search, it's completely ridiculous. Like, it's such an outsized thing to effectively be working on the same web page. And we all know that organic search drives more traffic and so on. But anyway, main point I want to make is that it doesn't take Google 6 months to catch up to you. It takes your organization 6 months to actually do something. And, you know, we all know from working with clients or working internally that we can identify issues and what to do quite quickly, but it's going to take 6 months for an enterprise company to actually make something happen. And, you know, Chantal, I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that, being that you manage.
Yes, I was thinking, I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't think I wanted to talk about this. Yeah, this is very true. So oftentimes when you start out with a client, everyone's like, yeah, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be great. And you realize what we do sometimes is expose some of the holes in an organizational structure. But what we also do in order from to selfish and also a client thoughtful view is keep them accountable. Okay, so you'll say, all right, you're having a little trouble with this. Well, here's a way that we found other folks have been able to work around that. Or, okay, it looks like you haven't done anything with this stuff and it's been 3 months. What's your plan? Can we help you make a plan? And then kind of come back and say, okay, so that was your plan. We got it implemented. These are the results that drove. Sometimes once people see results, they can be comfortable getting on the back of whoever they have to get on to speed things along. But it is very true. It could take sometimes 6 months to 9 months of a 12-month engagement of just going, yeah, we've got it. Thank you. You guys met your deadlines, but we just, you know, it's just not priority. And it's like the money's spent and the work is done. It's like buying furniture and just leaving it in the truck in front of the building.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, one of the things that we do when we get started with an engagement is we do what we call our SEO quick hits. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we'll deliver that in the first 2 weeks, but it could be 9 months before those things are done. And these are the quick hits, the things that are like, hey, give us an engineer for like a day and this can be fixed. So it is what it is. But, you know, our process is going to be the same no matter what, in that we're going to start from that, you know, customer segmentation and then move forward with a series of different parallel paths where it's like content audit, content plan, content recos, and then get to the point where things are being deployed. But our process is generally quite quick. You know, it's not that we are taking like 9 months to deliver work. It's a lot of this work that we do is delivered in the first 2 months. It's really just us like turning more into like management consultants at one point where we're like, hey, this is important. Why don't you get everybody to the table so we can actually get these things done and so on, rather than, you know, the core of the actual work that needs to be completed.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance.
Yeah, but ultimately it's worth it. You know, like we get great results doing this stuff for our clients. Like here's an example of, you know, year over year increase of 150% in leads driven from organic search, just from them doing a few of the things that we recommended. And, you know, this company being in the financial services space, these numbers are dramatically higher this year. So, you know, it's worth the time, but it's a lot of like, hey, person, did you do that thing that we said we were all going to do together? No? Okay, I can smile some more. I can give you some more data. Okay, I can tell your boss. Okay, now we're doing it, right? Cool. You know, but that's the job. So anyway, so start 2021 with some goals. You know, we want to make sure that these goals are measurable. Everybody knows what a SMART goal is at this point. For SEO, we've got to consider what's happening from a technical perspective, on-page perspective, which also, of course, overlaps with that. And then, of course, the off-page perspective. You know, it's still the case that if you're a large site that's existed for a long time, one of the things that you can do right away is take a look at your broken backlinks and identify how many they are and where they're pointing to, and then 301 redirecting them. But what we found in more recent years is that you can't just 301 redirect. Like we all always knew that you can't just 301 redirect to home pages and things, but it seems like the dial has turned up a bit with respect to them looking to match the previous content with the new content. And so what we're doing is like entity analysis on the expired content versus, you know, the content that we want to point to. And we've seen that that's yielded more value than just like broadly 301 redirecting, even if it was like from, you know, let's say we're talking about e-commerce, from product detail page to category page, we're finding that this is just a way better approach and it yields better performance. So that's a tip that I would recommend y'all consider moving forward. But you also want to focus on your audience. And again,
Mike, we have a question too that kind of fed to that.
Sorry.
No,
structuring SEO teams in 2021. Would you recommend separate technical SEO team or a team member that sits inside embedded with engineering? Yes, I would definitely recommend that there's a team member that's on the engineering side. I think the reality of where we're at in SEO right now is that so many SEOs are more content focused SEOs, and they don't have the level of technical skill that a lot of the previous SEOs or previous generation of SEOs had, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing, but we need more engineers or technical SEOs that have engineering skills and understand like product development skills and things like that, so that they can speak that language and act as that bridge to get the things done from a technical perspective. So everything I just described with like the entity matching and things like that, you're going to need a technical person to get done. And so, yes, I would definitely recommend that you either have like an engineer on the SEO team or a technical SEO on the engineering team. And what about adding specialized BI data analytics skills to the SEO team? So yeah, why don't I just give you a bit of the structure of how we do our teams. So internally, we sit in pods. And so a pod would be, like an account manager, which is Chantal, an SEO engineer, which would be Alex, or Alex Sklar, who y'all may have seen in previous webinars. We've got Jen, who's an analyst, who's kind of like a data scientist. And then we've got a content strategist. So that would be the core of our client teams. We've also got developers and designers that we bring in and out as required. But the reason why I'm saying all that is our teams are structured in a way where we've got someone who can sit with engineers. We've got someone with business intelligence skills that can really dig into analytics problems as well. So yeah, what I wanted to point out here is that we need to focus on our audiences, because everybody's audiences have changed. If you got personas that you used previously, those user behaviors have changed. Those user needs have changed. Keywords that people are searching for have changed as well. So you've really got to dig into that again and understand the front end of who's coming in and what the user is behind the visit. And then that keyword research needs to be realigned with the stages in the user journey that users are in. So if previously it was like, hey, how do I, find your store so I can go to it? That may have changed to, does this brand offer curbside delivery? And so understanding how that has changed is going to change how you're going to approach your content or what keyword you need to optimize for going forward. So let's get into some of the opportunities for 2021. I'm going to bucket this into two different groups. So structured data opportunities and natural language generation opportunities. I think a lot of the other things are the same as what we've been targeting, in previous years. But I think that these two items are things that are especially important and valuable going into 2021. So structured data, FAQs and how-to content, so important right now because they're getting so much more visibility. It allows you to take up more of the SERP real estate, and they're easier to get than featured snippets. And so we do a lot of this work with a lot of our clients right now. And some of the clients that have been so bullish about featured snippets didn't know as much about FAQs and how-tos. And we've been kind of reinforcing this idea that these are better because there's something that are more guaranteed, whereas feature snippets can come and go pretty easily. Feature snippets are still valuable, of course. It's just, again, they can come and go because that part of the algorithm still seems to be in flux. But definitely something I recommend structuring your content to support. And then a newer thing is the live event schema markup. So you can get visibility for your live videos that you're doing. And so being that brands are going after more live video content, this is definitely something that we recommend marking your content up for. And so in the same idea of structured data, I think of information architecture as the way that you structure your data as well. And so as you're ramping up into new concepts and ideas that people are looking for information on, you definitely want to continue to optimize using these topical clusters. So if you're thinking about like your hub and spoke model of content creation, well, you've got your core question or your core piece of content, and then you've got the other questions that you want to answer around that further reinforce that you are a expert in this topic area. And I would recommend that you use the people also ask questions to drive that. And so, we're seeing more and more of that stuff pop up in Google, and you can use tools like SERP API to extract that data and then use that to build out what your content plan is around those topics. And then the stuff that I'm really excited about is natural language generation. So I have direct access to GPT-3. I think that they've closed the beta at this point, but they're about to start offering it as a paid API. But here's an example of me using it just today as I was, refining these slides. I asked it, what is search engine optimization? And it gave me back this copy. It said, search engine optimization is the process of improving the visibility of a website or a web page and a search engine's natural, unpaged, organic search results. That's a very well-written explanation of what SEO is. And it didn't take me more than like 2 seconds to generate it. So, there's a lot of ways that you can approach this. There's an API tool called InferKit. It also has a interface where you can just put in the prompt and it'll write that copy for you. It's relatively inexpensive, and there's a lot of ways that you can approach this where you're making data-driven copy so that you're injecting your data from your data models and such into it. And I wrote a blog post about this on SEJ that I recommend you check out. And also in the NLG side, there's this concept called text summarization, where you can take the copy that's on your pages and summarize it to create things like meta descriptions and page titles and so on. And Hamlet Batista, who's been doing a lot of the great content in this space, has a few posts on SEJ where he talks about how you can do this. So yeah, I think those are some of the core opportunities. And I want to jump into the Q&A because we've got 8 minutes left. Ray mentioned that Market Muse is also playing in this space. They have a tool that they call their first draft. As I understand it, they're not using GPT or anything like that, but they're creating content in a way that's very focused and learning on data sets that are very relevant to whatever it is that you're trying to discuss. So let's get into some of these questions. Okay.
That was
So first question, and I'm going to throw this one over to Chantel.
Oh no.
What is the biggest mistake that companies make with SEO from your perspective?
Thinking it's turnkey. The biggest mistake companies make is thinking if they do one thing, everything is just going to be perfect. It's going to be fixed. And that they don't really have to be involved or be accountable or track a task down. So I think the disconnection from SEO is the biggest mistake that people make. Yeah, that's the biggest mistake. Thinking, oh, we hired iPullRank, it's going to be perfect. It's like, no,
well, it's going to be perfect because it's us. But
when I hear the book and say, these are the things you must do, you have to open the book because osmosis does not work when you're doing SEO. It just doesn't.
Totally agree.
Jared, what are your thoughts on that as someone who's selling SEO to our clients and other people?
I'd have to agree with Chantel 100% because that's mostly what I hear on the phone conversations, right? So either teams have, it's all about what resources you have, right, in order to implement, right? So I think, understanding what that is, what are the goals, right? And I think people just think that we're going to turn the switch on and, hey, in 6 months it's going to be this and the third. And it's a lot of different things there's a lot of different variables that attribute to your success, right? And that's what I think that a lot of people don't understand sometimes. Most of the seasoned SEOs do, but it's also about the, what resource you have to also back you up, right? What other things you're going to do to implement these things and changes we do. And that's why they outsource people like us. So.
Yeah, I would. Only thing I would add to that is the thinking of organic search traffic being free. It's not free. It's a function of the things that you're doing across your marketing effort. And as long as you are optimizing that marketing effort, then you're not going to have issues. But it's not a free channel.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. What do you believe will be a fad of 2021? Something that may sound glam and exciting, but isn't worth the effort.
I was hoping you would pick that question.
Well, why don't you?
I don't have an answer. I wanted to hear what you had to say. I was like, I hope he picks that because I want to know. I'm very curious.
I think that there's potential for natural language generation to be a fad. And what I mean by that is, when people don't do it the right way, it ends up creating content that's not valuable. It ends up creating like some duplicate content. It ends up creating content that, it's grammatically correct, but in some cases doesn't make sense. And so if people go into it expecting it to work like how content spinning or article spinning worked, in the last decade, they're going to be very disappointed, or they're just going to throw the content up without looking at it. And from my perspective, I still believe that it's very much first draft content. I think it's just going to help your editorial team move faster, but it's still going to need to be an editing layer to it. What I'm really interested in is this idea that you can generate perfectly optimized content. And I think we're going to get to that point. And then what happens is, well, if everyone can generate perfectly optimized content, what is it that Google uses to determine what needs to rank?
Yeah.
I've often wondered that, but it'll take us a while to get there. Yeah.
It depends on who focuses on it. All right. Let's see. All right. Do you see a different approach needed around promotional investment with budgets being tighter this year? I.e., how can you be proactive in links and promotion with a smaller budget?
I'm not sure about the link. I was gonna say not sure about the link, but promotion with a small budget. If I had a limited budget, I'd be putting all my chips in on social. To be honest with you, and the reason why I say that, like, there's especially like channels like LinkedIn. So for those people who don't know, like the organic reach right now on LinkedIn is just incredible right now. So if you guys have a team that's that's willing to post, willing to create content, willing to do videos, willing to do stories, willing to do all these different things, I think that's the best way to engage with your target audience because your buyers are on there, right? So that's something you could do from a standpoint. And then how do you drive that traffic from LinkedIn back to your website, and how do you engage with them in a further way to eventually convert? So those are some things that I would be looking at in terms of links. I'm not sure. I do have a thought on it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it, guys.
Yeah, on the link side, I mean, I give this point every time people ask me like how to approach link acquisition. When I ran marketing for a link building agency, we had 11 people on our team, and then the agency itself had like 100 people building links. So in the space of 1 year, they built 3,000 links from outreach. In that same year, my team with no outreach built 11,000 links just from putting content out. So I think that there's two things that you should consider doing. One, ramp up your content effort, and take some of that paid or that budget that you have, put it into paid media to further promote that content, put it in front of bloggers and journalists and things like that. So they are getting more visibility on it, and they end up linking to it, through those efforts. And then some of that content should be content that is very informational and comes across in the process of journalists doing their due diligence and their research to write about something. So then they end up linking to your state of content or whatever it is. And then about content acquisition. So if you can buy a piece of content, even if it's like one page that has a bunch of links to it, and say like, I want to buy this page in the 301 redirect to my site, you can build a bunch of links short term from doing that tactic. You can also do that on the domain level. So we're running out of time. I have one more question that came in. What can clients do to get the most value out of an SEO agency? I'm going to throw that one over to Chantel first.
Be present, participate, be open from the beginning, listen, take what we say, our advice, and implement. So probably craft an internal implementation plan as soon as you sign the contract, like how are we going to get this done? And then when you're being directed or given suggestions, follow them.
Awesome. And I'm just going to answer this one real quick. What has been the best way to show strong ROI from all your experience? So I think that comes from just effective measurement planning in the beginning. You know, we do like a benchmark report in the beginning of our engagements. We also make sure that measurement is set up the way that makes sense for the business. So we don't want to just be showing rankings unless it's a client that only allows us to use rankings as a measure. But, you know, we want to understand what the business impact is from the work that we do. And so we make sure that we're measuring against those conversion goals. And if we can get a dollar figure for those conversion goals, we show what the incremental value was from all the implementation that we've done. And that tends to, you know, make it very clear what our value is. And in fact, we had a few situations recently where we had to like bring that back into the focus so clients knew what we were, what value we were bringing.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a quick question too, Mike, because Michael said something in the chat. He said he spent 2 years trying to convince management he needed a blog. Then an outside agency forced the issue, and now it's starting to take off, and industry and others in industry are noticing and commenting on it. Right? How do you get buy-in from management to create a content plan or content strategy without any result or ROI to show for it yet? So I'm just curious to hear you guys. You know, how do you get a CEO to say, "Hey, this is what we need to do right now," if you don't have any ROI attached to it?
Yeah, two things. One, the keyword research will support that because you can then tie that to the projections. And we've got a whole ebook on that, you know, forecasting ROI. Or you can see what are competitors doing and then use tools like SimilarWeb and SEMrush to show the traffic that's being driven to them. And then back that into, well, if we got this traffic, how much value would that drive from a conversion perspective?
And to add to that, to piggyback on that, evidence defeats doubt at all times. Absolutely. So when we come with data and evidence that is trackable and provable, it should defeat doubt unless someone's being obtuse. And being obtuse is fine because then you have to employ people skills to really unpack, well, what is slowing you down? What's stopping you from making this decision that I've just presented to you that will solve your problem? So that's my role as well, is to kind of get in there and figure out like, okay, so I've just provided you with the solution, but you don't want to take it. So let's talk a little bit more about what are you scared of happening if we fix this problem?
Yep.
So I've just improved.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Exactly. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much to my guests, Chantel and Jerry.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everybody spending the time with us today. And yes, the answer to the question is the first draft tool is by Market Muse. GPT-3 is by OpenAI, and there's a lot of open source stuff out there as well. But anyway, if there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out. You can email us at hello@iPullRank.com. Hit us up on Twitter. I'm also just iPullRank on all the things. And yeah, definitely get in touch. We'll send out this video. We've got a bunch of other webinars coming up pretty soon. We just locked one down with Hamlet Batista where we're going to talk about automated testing. So hope you all join us for that as well. All right. See y'all later.
Thanks, guys.